Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fuel the Conversation, a podcast for fuel people by fuel people. My name is Freddie Riddler, and joining me today is the man who's lacking a lot of sleep, I'm guessing, Kyle Sheehan. Kyle, how are you doing today, and how are we lacking the sleep till this day?
I'm doing really good, and I'm looking forward to the Southeast convention that's coming up. I never thought I'd go. I'm going to go to a work convention, and I'm going to go there to get some sleep. That you never thought in any of my years working that would be a goal or ambition of mine to go out there and go, oh, I'm going to get 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep there. That sounds great. And Brian is joining me in that boat too, because he has an infant that was introduced to the world around the same time mine was as well.
That's true.
Yeah. And to get to Brian just a second, I'm going to share a fun story with Kyle. That's the reason I brought it up, because he came in my office yesterday and says, hey, I'm coming in on this day to the expo. Do we have a lot going on? I'm like, I know, I'm really not sure, Brian or Kyle. He goes, good, because I think I'm just going to sleep. So
order room service in, sleep for the extra 2 hours that night, no going out and really engaging a lot, but I'm going to be well rested for the start of that show. So if anybody's going to that show, we'll be rip-roaring ready to go on the start date there.
I'll give you Kyle's cell phone number later on the podcast. But today's podcast is with Brian Follick. He is one of the members at Consulting Psychologists Incorporated. Brian, welcome to our podcast. Why don't you give a quick introduction, how it all started, take us back in time. I know you and your dad run the business. Tell us a little story about the Follick Consulting Psychologists Incorporated.
Sure thing. Yeah. It's well, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. And this is a night where I actually got decent sleep with my little guy, Sully. So I'm ready and raring to go. But yeah, we're a small family practice. My dad's been a psychologist for about 40 years in this line of work, and I've been doing it for about 12. And it's a lot of fun to work with him. And basically, people hear the word psychologist, they think of the clinical realm, which is where I studied, right, when I was working on my doctorate. But I made the transition over here. What we do is we work exclusively in the business world. We help people and leaders and teams and organizations be their best. We do that in a lot of different ways. That's my favorite part about the job, is actually the variety of ways that I get to help and offer our services. I'm sure we'll talk about some of that today. But the bad joke I always talk about is that the apple with my dad sort of fell away from the tree and then rolled down and hit the trunk, because I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd be following in my dad's footsteps. I had like 20 different majors in undergrad, and here we are, right? So
go ahead, Kyle. I'm going to let you kick this off, because you know the story of bringing Follick into this business, and I would like for you to share that story with the viewers and listeners.
Yeah, so I think the overlaying theme of this podcast is going to be change. It's the only constant thing in life, right? Is change. And Brian, what was it? 7 years ago, I think already. And man, time flies to say that. Before I was even a father, I met Brian, and we brought Brian in as we realized that in our business and how we'd set up with a brothers and sisters as founders of this business. When you come in as cousins, you don't have that same bond that brothers and sisters do. So we realize there's a gap here, and anywhere there's a gap, there's potential for headbutting, there's potential for animosity, and we go, well, how can we make this more seamless if the end goal is to transition and have the founders retire and bringing in a second generation into an ownership role? And that's where Brian came into play, and started off with just us as second gen of introductions and meeting and discussions, and how do we build a team of second generation ownership. And then that started to branch off as that timeline progressed. We started to realize, well, this isn't just a transition of ownership. This is a transition in business mentality, and in bringing in key players that have been with our organization for decades, like the Freddie Riddlers and Jason Butos and Nate Balls and Barry Barksdales and so many others in this business that have watched this thing grow from the mom and pop roots of a back room of a propane company into the business it is today. Those were key members in this transition. And Brian, you helped us realize that. And I guess my first question to you is, when you think about business transitions and ownership transitions, you think finances. How are we financially going to be able to do this? And your approach was completely separate from that. So when you're looking at businesses, and especially ones in transitionary phases, what's maybe your first bit of advice to that company to go look at this when you're starting to have those discussions?
That's a great question. I mean, you're right. There's business is so fascinating and complex. It's ever evolving. That's one of the things I love about working in this realm. But we tend to sort of attend to we. What's the word I'm trying to think of here? We attend to the financial side of things. We attend to the
Focus.
sort
You
of
focus
strategy,
on that.
and yeah, we focus on it. And so, oftentimes we might not miss, but not give as much attention as we need to the interpersonal dynamics or the people at play. That's a critical factor. There's a famous Deloitte study, big consulting firm, I think back in 2010, surveyed a whole bunch of Fortune 500 organizations and different firms they worked with about change initiatives, right? What makes them succeed? What makes them fail? What was interesting is up to 70% of them failed, right? Didn't work, didn't end up working out the way that they intended to, or didn't have the outcomes they were after. And when they really dug into the data, what they realized is the ones that worked attended to the people, paid attention to the people, worked with people, brought them along, made it feel like it was happening with them, not to them. And so that's the first thing that, obviously I'm biased as a psychologist, right? People are my bread and butter. That's where I would encourage you to look. One of the reasons that you all reached out was you had done a survey with your employees, right? And that gave you some insight into how people were feeling, gave you some insight into what people were looking for and maybe needing. And you took that to heart. And so when you're thinking about change, be it big or small, if it's just on the team sort of size of things, or if it's organizational wide, you got to think about the people, their thoughts, their reactions, what they might need.
So, Brian, you come into this organization not knowing a lot about us or what we do in the propane industry. That's got to be difficult of saying, we're looking for some advice, we're looking for some help, we're transitioning from first gen or the founder to the second gen. They back 70 plus employees.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot riding on those conversations because it's not just the 4 second gen, but it's all the staff and it's all of us here at RCC going, what's the next step? Are we okay? Is this going to work? How are they going to run this business? Are they mature enough to do this? I mean, there's so many of these thoughts and questions that are in our heads. I can't imagine that it all gets funneled to yours. Can you
Oh, yeah.
talk a little bit about the approach of how you sit down and talk to the four of them saying, here's what we need to do as a team to collaborate?
Absolutely. It's an ever evolving kind of an approach. There's a lot of ways to do this kind of work, and we're small for a reason, and that's because we're very fluid and adaptable. And I think you need to be to do this work well, especially with families and especially with smaller businesses, right? If I came in and just said, well, here's the 7 steps you're going to follow to success, and this is the way you're going to get there, that might help, but probably not. The first thing you got to do is really assess who you're working with, what the business is like, the unique nature of the dynamics at play, what the family's like, how they're feeling about each other, how the first and second generation might be perceiving where things are at and where things might be going. You have to get a lay of the land, but you're not going to get all that right away. And so it's sort of an ongoing process as you're getting to know people and you're getting to know the business. And you start small, right? With the group of 4 that I've really come to know and appreciate and value my partnership with over these years. And then you gradually branch out and start to engage with people like yourself, Freddie, and you grow to appreciate those relationships as well. To comment on the propane side of it, you're absolutely right. I don't know anything about propane. I know just enough to be dangerous at this point. Software too, right? I'm not an expert in that, but that's not what you need from me. At least I hope not, right? Because then I'm not doing a very good job this whole time. But I'm here to help with the people, with the relationships, the dynamics, the interplay, styles, all that stuff.
So you had mentioned something in that initial piece that we had taken a survey or sent a survey off to all of our employees and said, hey, this is something that we're thinking. These are the initial. We hadn't even planted a seed yet, right? We had the dirt, we had the seed here, and we're going, all right, well, we're thinking of planting that and watching it grow a little bit. And to start that, we go, well, all right, you guys are all of our water. Well, how does the water feel about all of this? And those are difficult things to send out, and you're opening up a little bit and looking at some potential hard truths and some potential hard opinions. So what advice would you give to a company that maybe has never done an employee survey, or maybe is worried about what all the thoughts are that the employees have that they're not necessarily saying, and the animosity of a survey gives? Those are scary things to deal with. Do you have any thoughts into those?
Oh yeah, that's you. There's always the potential to open up a can of worms, right? And I think my grandfather said, "Never ask a question you don't want the answer to." Right? It's that's something to consider, right? Is if we're going to our employees, what are we hoping to learn? What are we comfortable learning, right? And that's not to say you want things hidden, but it's to say if you're that concerned about finding something out, that might tell you something in and of itself, right? And so targeting the right information is key, and asking the right questions is key. Anonymity is often key too, depending on the size of your business. It can be more or less important, and depending on your culture. And so the way you approach that survey, right, to make sure people feel like, well, if I write something a certain way or use a certain, style of speech or written communication, they're going to immediately know this is me, even though it's quote unquote anonymous, right? So maybe we do all multiple choice, right? Or so the survey design matters. The biggest thing I would say is talk it out with your key partners or other family members if you're a family business, or an outside resource like myself, to decide, A, what is our major goal? What are we hoping to learn and why? B, what opportunities do we have to learn about things we might not normally have insight into in doing this? And C, what format's going to get us there? That gets you to the how, the actual, well, what are we writing? And what are we asking people to respond on? A real quick answer to a complex issue, but hopefully
Yeah.
that gets at it.
No, you covered that very, very nicely, Brian. So Brian, with RCC, obviously with the generational changes that are happening right now with us, we also deal with some changes inside of our realm of a software company. We deal with new management. I'm talking about the marketers and all the propane users, the people
Sure,
that are using
sure.
our software. They deal with leadership changes, management changes, but the big one we have to always deal with is software changes.
Right.
It's there, we've been using this software company for 40 years. That's a big change for somebody, especially with technology, because technology changes every minute. So now we have to prep the end user to get ready for a new procedure, a new software, a new look, a new feel, a new way to run your business, because that's what a software company does. We offer a service to run their business. Do you have any suggestions or comments or thoughts on, to our viewers or listeners watching this? Well, hopefully they're all RCC customers right now, but it's anyone that watches these podcasts. If they're about to take on a new software change,
Sure.
what are some of the insight of what they should be doing before that happens?
Well, that's a great question. And it speaks to one of the things that I think is your bread and butter. Is not only are you guys experts in software and the specific industry you play in, you're experts on change management too, and helping people navigate that, which I think is really beneficial to your customers. But that, I think, your perspective of how do they set themselves up for even you coming in, right? For
Mhm.
putting in Mogo, or for helping them update their software, converting over, it's not necessarily always going to be as easy as you think it's going to be, would be the first comment, right? Is usually there's going to be stuff, especially if you're an owner or you're a leader on the key leadership team and you've got a number of employees below you, it's going to be stuff you miss. That's just reality. And so thinking, again, going back to the people element, about what their reaction is going to be, how they're feeling about it. Is this something that they're driving? Awesome. You're in a great position if they're like, we hate our current software and we need something new. But even in that circumstance, you are going to have to help them see and help them through the bumps in the road, kind of stay the course that this is going to be good in the long run. And sometimes that's not about convincing. It's not about changing their mind up front. It's about rolling with the resistance that they're going to have to it. Human beings in general just don't like change, right? I'm one of them. I'm not a huge fan of change. I talk about change all the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm great at navigating it myself, right? And so, the more that you give them some space to sort of struggle as they are adapting to a new software, give them room to talk about what they think is and isn't working, you might actually learn a lot about new ways to use it. Their job, right? What are things that are surprising you about what they're trying to do with the software that suddenly, wow, I didn't know they approached it that way, right? So you keep your ears open and keep guiding, as opposed to trying to just push them through and be like, you got to just get used to this and use it. That works sometimes, but it's not going to get you the result that you're probably really after, which is that adoption and that sense of, okay, we got something new we're excited about.
So one of the things you had mentioned in there that I really took away is trust the experts, right? That's kind of that's a tough thing to do at times, especially when you're in a leadership role and people are kind of looking towards you as the expert. But I think part of that is self-evaluation, trusting the expert, is finding your weak points or your areas that you could improve upon, and then finding that moment in time, and whether you're late to the party or you hit it right on the nail on the head of at what point do you kind of reach out. So in your experience, where do you find yourself kind of injecting into these decisions, and follow up to that is, where would you prefer to be? I'm sure that you've had many times and instances where you feel like you're a little bit too late to that and you wish they would have started maybe a year or two prior reaching out to you, versus this is probably the point where we should go. Is it at that point of, I realize that a change needs to happen? Or is it even before that of, I think a change might need to happen? Or is it, I decided to make a change and I should probably think and talk to somebody in your realm to help me navigate these waters?
You guys are asking some great questions today. I mean, that's an interesting thing, right? Because it depends on whether or not people know that what I do is even an option, right? As a resource, because it's more and more known these days that psychologists like myself operating in the business world are there as a resource, but it's not. Plenty of people are still like, what is this? How is this supposed to help? Right. And so it's a unique thing, but it really depends. I would say when I'm working I like to work really long term with my partnership organizations and the leaders I work with, like you guys, because I get to know you and you get to know how to best use me. And you've got a really good idea now, because there's so many moments where I'm like, does that sound like something you guys just want to run with, or anything I can do to help? You're like, nope, we got it. Right. But you also know this might be a good thing to loop Brian in on, because we may need a different perspective. And that's the sweet spot for me. Right. But most of the time, the first contact is a little later in the change cycle, or it's at that moment of, I'm worried, right? I'm concerned this isn't going to work out well. And almost always we're able to find our way through it. There's never a time where I've been like, nah, I can't do anything for you. Sorry. Right.
Your lost cause.
Exactly. That would not be a great thing to bring to the table. Just be like, yeah, you really screwed this up. Sorry. I don't know what to do about it. No, there's almost always something. And people that are even thinking, man, I wonder if there's somebody out there that can help, usually have the mindset that they're asking earlier than they think they are, right? They're 2 or 3 years away from a transition happening, and they might feel like that's more urgent than it is, but actually that's a great time to start, right? Or I've worked with people 6 months away from a transition, and that's fast and furious and hard, but it's possible, right? And so it really just depends on the complexity of it and kind of where you're at. But it's never too late, right? It's never too late to ask for help. And I'm sure you guys experience that too, right? Where it's like, okay, you're about to start using the software tomorrow and you haven't really done any prep yet, but we'll help you through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's going to be hard, but software and businesses aren't just numbers and what you see on paper. There's that non-measurable human element to all of these changes. And I just personally want to say thank you so much
Oh,
for
yeah.
what you've done for our business during our massive amounts of change that we're going
Mhm.
through. And I feel that we are in a better spot. And I know that you're going to say you could have done it without me. You could have navigated those, but I feel like we wouldn't have the involvement from the entire company that we have today, and we wouldn't be in an area of growth. We'd be in an area of transition right now, which I feel that RCC is now in an area of growth and was able to successfully navigate those choppy, rough waters of the transition rather seamlessly. And that has a ton of credit to give to you during that process.
I appreciate that. As you know, I'm a Minnesotan. I'm not great with compliments. I'm always working at bringing them in. I really appreciate that. Those are some very kind words. And of course, I believe you could have done it, right? And I have no doubt, but I really appreciate that. That means a lot.
That was a great comment, Kyle. Coming from the outside in, I can see it too.
So, Brian, you're in a really unique position where you kind of have one foot on the inside and one foot on the outside for this transitionary period of RCC amongst ownership. And one of the questions that we kind of get asked from the outside is, how is that transition going? How is the transition of ownership going? And one of our goals has always been, we want that to be seamless. We don't want a lot of ripples in the water to happen that then sometimes make it outside of the business, which is what you see quite a bit in business transitions, of those tough points or those points of contention amongst the transition making its way outside of the organization. So I'd love to ask, how do you feel from your outside foot that the business is doing in its transition?
I mean, that's a great question. And I would say great. I mean, you all have been working on this for 6, 7 years now since we started partnering together, right? And not that all that has been about strategy and timelines, but you've been preparing, right? Very intentionally. And that has put you in a really great position, because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of sort of steps, and I won't get too technical here, but in the process of succession planning, or in the process of, just organizing a transition. And it's really easy at any one of those points to miss key data points, to sort of run into difficulty or create turbulence among different players. And because part of my job too, having one foot in and one foot out, is I'm not only able to see the dynamics at play for the family and for key leadership, but also for the business in some ways, right? Well, I may not be an expert on anything that you guys do. I know a lot about business and how business is run, and I'm thinking a lot about, well, what does the business need, right? And how does that inform the succession planning process, the things that we might need to be doing? But there's a lot of steps that you've taken to make sure that this is going to be as seamless as it can be. I have, my dad will say this, he's done this for 40 years. It's never perfect, right? There's never a perfect succession process, but the more chance you give yourself to be ready for what that's going to look and feel like and what you're going to have to navigate, you increase the likelihood of it being a positive experience all around. That's really the goal, right? It's not perfection. It's getting through it in a positive way that sets not only you guys up for that next chapter, but the business as well.
First of all, thanks for plugging Mogo. We're
Yeah.
always we love when people just plug our product. It just organically happened. Thank you for that. But you made Kyle and you were both having a conversation about we didn't even know we needed somebody like a Brian to help our company out. So if any of you came to our seminar last year, Brian and his dad did a keynote and it was just outstanding.
Oh, thanks.
And we offer well, we don't offer it, but he offers his own solution that any of our customers can reach out to Brian and his
Oh, yeah.
consulting psychologist incorporated company. And Brian, why don't you just give a little plug of how they can reach out to you, because they might be watching this going, maybe we do need to talk to Brian. We're
Mhm.
going through some generation transitions right now. We need a little help. What can he offer our company? So maybe just how can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. They could reach out via my email, which I don't know. Can they put things on the screen?
We'll do it. Yeah, I'm
We can
gonna
put
have
that
them put it on the
there,
bottom so you can
right?
just point down.
Now I feel like I'm really on TV or something. And and so my email is great. That's a lot better because it's kind of long and wordy. Psychologists, we're not the most creative or like marketing savvy people, and so after we created our website, it was like, yeah, it's probably a little too complex. But you can call us, you can email me. Just a simple, hey, I wonder if you could help. Awesome. I'm happy to have the conversation. We are not the kind of people who are going to be like, well, we talked to you for 3 hours and you decided not to use us. Here's a bill. I don't care, right? If we're not the one to help you, we'll help you think about who that might be, right? But this might just be a good first step if you're even wondering. That might say you do need something, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's me, but I know a lot of people have a lot of connections in this sort of realm of resource and support that could be of value. And so please feel free to reach out. And if we do get a chance to work together, I'll look forward to it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Brian. I appreciate you for being on the podcast today. Kyle, thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it. It's a good conversation. I think our viewers and listeners really get something out of this one.
I was a little worried having my psychologist on a podcast out to the public, but I think it went really well.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for joining Kyle and Freddie's podcast, Fuel the Conversation.
A podcast for fuel people by fuel people. We really hope you enjoyed today's topics and you found them interesting, and we hope that you pulled some value out of our conversation today.
To hear more podcasts from Kyle, myself, and special guests, you can catch us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or the iTunes Store.
To find out more information on RCC, you can visit our website, www.rccbi.com. You can also find us on Facebook under Rural Computer Consultants, also under LinkedIn under Rural Computer Consultants, or go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at RCCInc79.
If you'd like to contact us directly, email us at sales@rccbi.com.
This is Kyle signing off.
And this is Freddie.
Until next time.